can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, I want to talk about Cobra Commander, number 1 through 5, written by Joshua Williamson, with art by Andrea Milana and color by Annalisa Leone. So to talk about Cobra Commander, the thing that's really cool about this book, and if you're not familiar with where this kind of falls into the new Energon universe, basically what this is all about is the Energon universe is, for all intents and purposes, a shared universe for both G.I. Joe and the Transformers, as well as a new intellectual property, Void Rivals. It all falls under the same banner. And it's cool because while, yes, they are a part of the same shared universe, the best part about this whole deal is that while the Transformers and G.I. Joe kind of jump back and forward in and out of each other's books, it's never to the point where it feels like it's too much. And it's also never really feeling like it's too little either. I feel like they do just the right amount of crossover, and in this, Cobra Commander probably is the one, because this is technically one of the first G.I. Joe series, the other being Duke, which is also of interest because Duke was the first G.I. Joe character to show up in Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers series. But that's neither here nor there. Cobra Commander is the series that I feel probably plays a little more into the Transformer shenanigans than anything else we've seen up to this point. What I love about this series and why I think Joshua Williamson did such a fantastic job with this book is that when you think about G.I. Joe and their, longtime villains, Cobra, the thing you probably think about first is Cobra Commander. And the funny thing about Cobra is that being a guy who's in his 40s who grew up watching G.I. Joe every morning before school, it's one of those things where, Cobra was cool, but at the same time, Cobra Commander was a joke. And here, he's not a joke. What I love about this series so much, and I don't know if this was intentional on Joshua Williamson's part, but the Cobra Commander that we are introduced to in this series, while yes, he has the look of the classic Cobra Commander, and yes, he also works for an organization that looks very similar to the Cobra from the 80s, and they even tie in Cobra Law itself, the more fantastical iteration of Cobra that no one really learned about until the G.I. Joe animated movie of the mid-80s. We see characters like Globulus and Nemesis Enforcer and all the wild and craziness that, comes and goes with that. But this is a Cobra Commander who actually is more reminiscent of a little version of G.I. Joe that I feel was woefully underwatched, and that's G.I. Joe Sigma 6. It was a version of G.I. Joe where the show kind of skewed more in an anime direction. The overall look, feel, and vibe had that kind of like early aughts anime kind of thing going on. And in that series, Cobra Commander was not a joke. He wasn't a guy who always ran off into the distance yelling, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!" He wasn't a coward. He was actually a straight up badass, which was very unusual for Cobra Commander. Like, he was a dude who was not going to run away from a fight with Duke. In fact, he would tell Duke to come get these hands. And while this Cobra Commander isn't exactly like that, he's a lot closer to it than he is the cowardly Cobra Commander from the 80s. And that's what I really love about the series. The Cobra Commander here is just that dude. He lets you know who he is. He's not afraid of anyone. He is always 10 steps ahead of everyone else in the room, and he knows he's the smartest guy amongst everyone. And he has no issues reminding anyone that that's the case. And he's also a guy that you probably shouldn't trust, but you also sometimes hope and pray that you can when it benefits you. Now, saying all that, I mentioned earlier this comic is probably more tied into the Transformers and the Energon universe than anything else that we've seen up to this point, and it's because if you've been reading Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers series, one thing you probably noticed is that Megatron has been largely MIA, and the thing that's kind of funny about that is he actually hasn't been. We know where Megatron is, and it's in the series. Megatron is actually being held in captivity by Cobra Law, and Cobra Commander has been experimenting on Megatron and using Megatron to develop new technologies for Cobra Law. And that's what the series is all about, because Cobra Law, if you're familiar with the actual Cobra Law organization, not Cobra itself, but Cobra Law has this weird thing where they don't really like inorganic things. And that's exactly what the Transformers are. They see the Transformers as abominations, and Globulus does not like the idea that Cobra Commander is using this same abomination to advance Cobra Law's ambitions. So Globulus, as he is wont to do, pretty much sends Cobra Commander on a fool's errand. A fool's errand that will remove him from being able to work on Megatron, which, by the way, Megatron is very aware of what's going on. Cobra Commander has to go out into the world and ends up running afoul of characters like the Dreadnoks, who are pretty much the same Dreadnoks that you might remember from the old cartoon. The only thing that you really don't see in regards to the Dreadnoks in this 5-issue series is you don't see Zartan. That's probably like the one bad thing about this. But because Zartan's not there, and I feel like Zartan is the more recognizable member of the Dreadnoks, considering he was their leader, but because he's not there, that means you get to focus on the other characters in the Dreadnoks, and they get a little more time to shine, and seeing them go toe-to-toe with Cobra Commander in this is a pretty cool thing. It's pretty awesome to see, just because you don't really think of the Dreadnoks as threats in the strictest sense. They are kind of lackeys more than they are anything else. But in this, they actually get to be effective, and I thought that was a really nice touch. And while at first I thought maybe we were getting a tease or a hint at a potential appearance of Dr. Mindbender, there's a character that shows up in the series who doesn't look like him, but like if for whatever reason he got turned into Dr. Mindbender, I wouldn't be surprised. But ultimately, I think this is just a whole other character altogether, and probably even someone from the old cartoon whose name I'm just not really, drawing anything on. I have a feeling if we do see Dr. Mindbender, it'll be elsewhere. But the whole point of this issue is that Cobra Commander is trying to figure out ways to synthesize Energon, which this is all of interest because that's the huge problem the Transformers are having right now. They can't figure out a way to synthesize Energon, at least not at the time of the creation of this first issue. They kind of have a handle on it now in their own series, but what Cobra Commander is trying to do is find ways to stretch Energon, to make it last even longer, like not necessarily to create more of it, but to expand it. And that's a huge part of this whole thing. And we also get the introduction, well, technically not the introduction, we see Destro over in the Duke series as well, but we get the introduction of these two characters, Cobra Commander and Destro, meeting for the first time, which I think is something that's really cool. And for Destro, I think it's also of note just because he is meeting a Cobra Commander that's very different than the Cobra Commander we're kind of used to Destro being around. In the old cartoon, it was very easy for Destro to see Cobra Commander as a complete and total idiot and someone who he would dime out in a heartbeat. But now we see Destro next to a Cobra Commander who is not necessarily the guy he is sure that he can do that to. He doesn't necessarily like Cobra Commander, but he is definitely watching him because he sees how much of a loose cannon he is. Cobra Commander, just in his first interactions with Destro, Cobra Commander basically lets Destro know that there's nothing he can do to him. There's no way for him to touch Cobra Commander in a way that Cobra Commander's not already willing to allow. This whole 5-issue miniseries is basically showing us the rise of Cobra in a way that the live-action movies never could accomplish. We are actually witnessing Cobra Commander come up from the rank and file, building himself up to being the Cobra Commander who we would probably see as more familiar, but yet at the same time, not a coward. He's building the actual Cobra from the ashes of Cobra Law. And at the same time, we're also getting to see other hallmarks of the G.I. Joe universe, like the Bats, or even characters that, if you're more familiar with the movies, a character like Mercer, who, for those who are unfamiliar, Mercer is a guy who in the movie, by the time you meet Mercer in the first G.I. Joe animated film, at one point used to be a part of Cobra and then later left them to become a part of G.I. Joe. And it's cool to see him here because it basically lets you know that Mercer's not going to be hanging around for very long, or at the very least, he's going to wind up leaving Cobra Commander and going to the Joes. So it's really cool to see how they do this and how Cobra Commander is working his magic to try and build up Cobra from out of nothing. There's a lot of commentary here that'll probably be lost on people, but watching Cobra Commander build Cobra from like nothing, it is very reminiscent of what you might see if you went to like a Nazi youth rally or like an alt-right MAGA, convention or whatever. It's all very similar stuff. Like the energy of it is very much the same. And not only that, but it even sets up some pretty interesting stuff for the future regarding Cobra Law and why Cobra Law will not necessarily be hanging around a lot on the Cobra Commander or G.I. Joe side of things, but even kind of sets up how they may factor in to maybe showing up in Void Rivals or just showing up in Transformers proper. So there's a lot of really cool stuff there regarding that. I highly advise, if you are not reading any of the Energon Universe comics, even if you are just the passingest of G.I. Joe fan or Transformers fan, you owe it to yourself to check this stuff out. It's actually really good. It's just Cobra Commander alone is very solid work from Joshua Williamson, and all the other Energon Universe books have been pretty damn good by my count. Scarlet came out this week, and I've already read it and have already been very much enjoying it because it's just more goodness, just like this, but from a different writer, and that's Kelly Thompson. And we have Destro coming up, I believe, in the next week or two, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be heat as well. And Transformers just does not miss. Daniel Warren Johnson's been killing it, and Robert Kirkman's been just lights out on Void Rivals. And Joshua Williamson also, who writes Cobra Commander, writes Duke. So, once again, it's a solid body of work here. I cannot recommend it enough. But if you have checked it out, if you are familiar with the Energon Universe or you have read Cobra Commander, let me know what you thought about it. And if you haven't, well, let me know if you're gonna check it out. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.